What's currently loaded on my Game Boy is one of the best Pokemon games ever made. But believe it or not, this is not actually a game made by Game Freak. Instead, it's a modified version of the original games by fans. These modified versions, better known as ROM hacks, take the original games that you know and love and then build upon them to add a new spin. Sometimes it's a new story, more Pokemon, or enhanced battle mechanics to make the game more interesting. The people behind these games are known as the ROM hacking community, and it's made up of a bunch of dedicated fans who have put in countless hours to really dissect these games and understand every single technicality so they can use that to build something new. I've been keeping up with the Pokemon ROM hacking scene for a long time, and I think it's fair to say that we're currently in a golden age of Pokemon ROM hacks. This is mostly thanks to various decompilation projects where fans literally go in and reverse engineer the source code for how these games were constructed. And once you understand every single piece of how the game was made, modding these games becomes a lot easier and more accessible than ever. Not only is there new stuff constantly in the works, but there's a really extensive history of completed ROM hacks. So there's so many out there that it can be a little bit overwhelming on which ones to even play. Now, you might already be sold and asking how to play these games. Well, the most common way people play them is through an emulator. This is basically software that mimics the parts of a Game Boy on a different device, such as your phone or computer. Game Boy emulators pretty much exist on everything, so if you can get the ROM file for the Pokemon game that you want to play, you're pretty much good to go. But if you're anything like me, you might feel like playing a Pokemon game on something like a phone just doesn't feel quite right. But thankfully, we can have our cake and eat it too, because as I demonstrated at the beginning of the video, we can play these games on traditional hardware using these nifty little devices called flash carts. What this is a physical Game Boy cartridge with a little slot for a micro SD card. What we can then do is load ROM files onto the SD card and then have the original game hardware run these ROMs as if they were official cartridges. Over the years, there's been a ton of different flash carts on the market, but I'd say that the gold standard now, especially for the Pokemon games, is going to be the Easy Flash Omega. Pokemon games, both on the Game Boy Advance and the Game Boy Color, have a lot of unique features in them that make them a bit more complicated to emulate. For example, the real-time clock in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. The Easy Flash Omega comes with all the right parts to account for the intricacies inside these Pokemon games, so they're able to run without any issues. Now, there's technically two versions of the Easy Flash Omega that you can buy. The first is the original run, and then the second is the definitive edition that came out a bit later. I'd say for most people, the definitive edition is the one you want to go with. It has better save management. In the old one, you actually had to wait a little bit after you save the game, otherwise you might risk losing your progress, and then it also is a little bit more efficient with battery, so you'll be able to play longer. The only reason I can think of to go with the original over the definitive is that the original had the option to use a cart that was shaped perfectly to fit in a DS Lite. So if you play on a DS Lite and you find it really annoying when the Game Boy cartridge sticks out, then the original might be a good fit for you. Now, like I mentioned before, there's a ton of different ROM hacks for you to choose from. Some of them are going to have some fake Pokemon, crazy stories, really wacky premises, and you're going to get some with insane difficulty curves. But in my personal opinion, the best ROM hacks to play are the ones that can resemble an experience that Game Freak themselves would have made. So here's a few of my recommendations that I feel really scratch that nostalgic itch, but still integrate some quality of life changes and some of the more modern battle mechanics that make the game a bit more playable. First up, we have my personal favorite ROM hack, which is Pokemon Gaia, created by Spherical Ice. Gaia takes place in the brand new Orptus region, which is fully fleshed out and contains a diverse selection of Pokemon from generations 1 through 6. The game also alleviates some of the more outdated aspects of Gen 3 by adding features from later games such as the physical special split, the fairy type, updated movesets, and even working Mega Evolutions from X and Y. While there are newer and fancier ROM hacks with more features than Gaia, the thing that really draws me to it is how it really excels at capturing the tone of the official Game Freak titles while still modernizing the experience with some major quality of life changes. So if you're looking for an authentic feeling experience that still adds enough to keep things interesting, I'd say Gaia is the way to go. Next up, we have Pokemon Crystal Dust by Sierra Affinity. Similar to how Fire Red and Leaf Green are remakes of Red and Blue using the Gen 3 engine, Crystal Dust is a faithful remake of Pokemon Crystal using the Emerald engine. I played the 2012 version of this game way back when, but it's since been updated in 2020 and 2021. I'd say if you're a big fan of Generation 2 like I am, then this hack offers a really cool experience to play through those games again with a new but still familiar aesthetic. There are other Gen 2 hacks with updated stories and mechanics like Liquid Crystal, but I really like Crystal Dust for its attention to detail. It really nails its goal of accurately recreating Johto with that 3rd generation aesthetic. And while we're on the topic of aesthetic, next on the list is Pokemon Emerald Sea Glass. This game essentially reverses the premise of Crystal Dust by answering the question, what if Gen 3 was reimagined on the Game Boy Color? Developed by Nemo622, This ROM hack is a perfect blend that provides a nostalgic visual overhaul while still offering a definitive Gen 3 experience. All Pokemon from the first 3 generations are obtainable, including legendaries, and weaker Pokemon have even had their stats modified to make the game more interesting. Battle mechanics have also been updated to include the physical special split, along with the addition of the fairy type. But I think the single coolest feature that they added was the ability to have your Pokemon follow you around. So next time you're considering revisiting the Hoenn games, I'd say give this version a try. Pivoting over to a Game Boy Color ROM hack, we have Pokemon Super Gold 97. In case you haven't heard the tale, the Pokemon Space World demo was a prototype version of Pokemon Gold and Silver that was shown off at Nintendo's Space World event in 1997. It featured a different region layout and multiple Pokemon designs that didn't end up making it into the final cut of the game that was sold in stores. Not much was known about this demo until 2018, when the demo ROM files were actually leaked online. From there, enthusiasts were able to go in and explore these games. This brings us to Super Gold 97, which is creator level 3's interpretation on what a version of Gold and Silver may have looked like if they kept to the style and content that was seen in the Space World demo. Normally, I'm not a huge fan of ROM hacks that use unofficial Pokemon, commonly referred to as Fakemon, but to me, this hack is a bit different. It provides a view of what Johto may have looked like in an alternate universe using official assets created by Game Freak, so it's just too interesting to pass up. So if you have any interest in actually playing through these demos, but are looking for a bit more of a fleshed out experience, I think Super Gold 97 will scratch that itch. As my last recommendation, we have another Game Boy Color title, Pokemon Orange. Developed by Pia Carrot, Orange is a complete hack of Pokemon Crystal set in the Orange Islands. This is another hack that really stays true to the spirit of the original Pokemon games, while still incorporating some of the fun additions from later generations, and even the Pokemon anime. The game updates all the Pokemon's base stats to the standard set in Gen 7, and even features a few Alolan form variations. What I think really sells this hack for me is the tropical setting of the Orange Islands. The color scheme for this game just looks amazing, the sprites really pop out, and it looks phenomenal, especially on original hardware. So those are my personal recommendations on ROM hacks that I enjoyed. I definitely have a certain type, but I'd say don't feel shy about doing your research and investigating what other ROM hacks are out there. One other note to add is that when you're researching these games, you might come across an individual flashcard for a specific ROM hack. And although these look shiny and tempting, I'm actually going to advise you to avoid them. Like I mentioned before, the parts inside a Pokemon game are actually pretty different from your average GBA game, so unless the person who manufactured it really knows what they're doing, there's a good chance that a lot of the features in the game are not going to work correctly. Along with that, any profits made off of these carts are not actually going to go to the creator of the ROM hacks. Usually it's just resellers or an international factory that is able to mass manufacture these and profit off of somebody else's work. So I'd say just stick with the Easy Flash, and if you want to support the community and the creators of these ROM hacks, usually they have some sort of donation platform like Patreon or Ko-Fi. And I'll end the video by just really reinforcing that I do think playing these ROM hacks on traditional hardware is a really magical experience. So if you can, go and dig up your old Game Boy and then get ready to experience these old Pokemon games in a brand new and exciting way.